I will start talking about our purpose in Latinex, which is to follow the highest standards of corporate governance to advance and promote the Panamanian security market in a transparent and efficient manner, enabling the development of sustainable capital markets that contribute to the country's social and economic development. Latinex first sustainability report was recently presented to our stakeholders this past May. The report applies the standards of the Global Reporting Initiative and the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, positioning Latinex at the forefront of reports at the local and international level, becoming the second stock exchange in Latin America with a sustainability report under SASB standards. So now we can start with the question, and there is a lot of misconception about the difference between ESG and responsible investing. So Eduardo, I would like to start with you, asking you environmental, social, governance have come to mean two different things to different people. Could you please clear us on the difference between ESG and responsible investing?
A lot for the invitation. For us at TRI is really important to have the opportunity to continue spreading the message about the importance of responsible investment and how this topic is evolving in Latin America. So, to all the people in charge of this event, thanks a lot for the invitation, and especially to allow us to connect through this option and interact with you in this session. So coming back to your question, let me mention this. For sure, there is a lot of conversations about ESG. I will blame the media, not in a bad way, but this is a topic that it's crazy how it's getting a lot of momentum, and the media and some politicians are using the ESG concept maybe as a way to question the value of all this movement from companies and people that they are understanding that we need to move forward on a sustainability path, and again, investors and companies should play a very strategic role on that. So just to clarify, I think it's important to mention that there is a simple difference between, for example, what is ESG and what is responsible investing. So, for example, responsible investment is the integration of ESG factors, and that integration will allow investors to make better investment decisions. So I think it's also important to clarify that ESG is just three letters that are trying to put together a lot of potential material financial factors that investors now are considering to make better investment decisions. And also this is not only about the media. It's also important to mention that maybe some investors and some companies are using these three letters and just as a marketing plot, and because of that we are also seeing a lot of conversations about the concept of greenwashing. So I think that's another topic that we need to consider, and that is important that is evolving in a right way, and we find solutions to that challenge. But just to wrap up for clarity, I think every time that you hear about the concept of ESG, especially from the investment side, and those three letters, the idea is to analyze the topics, the material information that are connected with ES and G topics, and that what investors are trying to do is just to make better investment decisions and complying with the fiduciary duty. And that's, why ESG information is getting more strategic in the last years.
Thank you, Eduardo. There is also sometimes a confusion between ESG and RSE, but this is for another panel, but thank you very much. Valerie, as the biggest market in infrastructure, you have an important role to play in facilitating investment in sustainable finance. When it comes to raising sustainable capital, issues are still confronted with processing issues and informational barriers that limit financing. Could you please tell us how can Euroclear help reducing the barriers to ESG issues and investments?
So good morning to everybody, and again, thank you as well for inviting me. I feel really honored to be part of this conference. So indeed, before really attacking your question and the barriers, I think one thing that I would like also I would like to step back a little bit and to remind the audience that the raison d'être of Euroclear as a market financial infrastructure is really to bring together the issuers and the investors, and this for all types of issuances. And that's something that we have brought to the Panamanian market, in the sense that we had about 8 years ago already created a link with Panama, allowing the Panamanian issuers to access the international investors in a very safe way for both parties. We have done that for Panama. We've done that also for Mexico, Chile, Peru, Argentina, so for a number of Latin America countries. And of course, those links that we have opened are already to some extent available for ESG issuances. So already today, the link that exists can cater for the ESG issuances. And we have seen about 2 years ago, Chile issuing the first ESG security for the international market. Now, fair to say that despite this availability, there are indeed still a number of barriers. And the barriers exist in both on the supply and on the demand side. So typically on the supply side, so looking at the issuers, it is fair to say that for small or new issuers in developing economies, it is still pretty difficult to access the market infrastructure, to access the international investors. And therefore, there is, a feeling that issuing ESG is, to cover for the transition to, a greener economy, is something which is pretty difficult for issuers who have a small size, who are not well known by the international market, and also who are lacking local infrastructure, local capital markets, which can link them back to the international investors. So fair to say that, yes, on the issuer side, even the ones who are willing to go ahead, are facing difficulty. On the demand side, so it's more on the investor side, the demand is huge. You are reading in the press every day the number of asset managers who are developing ESG investment, who are willing really to make informed investment decisions. But then start also another problem, in the sense that the standards to define how ESG friendly a security is are absolutely not common across the different markets. Every market is coming with its own taxonomy, with its own criteria to define an ESG. And therefore, indeed, for an investor, understanding properly the asset classification, the ESG score of the security they are buying is extremely difficult. And we have seen a number of cases recently whereby, people have been fined for, not necessarily investing in sufficient green securities, contrary to what they had initially mentioned. But often it is not that they were in bad faith, but that the information they received from the issuers were maybe not always the right one, or at least was not meeting the criteria that they were supposed to follow as an investor in a given country. So clearly there are still a need to standardize the criteria to define how ESG friendly a security is. And so as far as we are concerned, we are spending now a lot of time to try to help the market on both sides. So trying to lower the barriers for the issuers to access international investors. This is one area of the development that we are pursuing. The other thing as well, we really want to bring transparency in the information which is disclosed by the issuers to the investors. And we have recently invested in a fintech company who has coded all the European taxonomy to help the European issuers to disclose in a very standardized way all the information related to their ESG score. And we are working now with Greenomy with different countries to see how they could continue to also codify the local taxonomy into, into a market. And so typically, I mean, I'm very proud to say that Greenomy is presenting its services to the Grupo de Trabajo de Finanzas Sostenibles de Panama, because, I mean, if we could also continue to support Panama in showing, in a very efficient way, very automated way, how much their issuers are indeed ESG friendly, we believe that we would be in a position to continue to provide Panama, a further access to the international investors. So yes, so our role as an FMI is, as I said, is to lower the barriers, to provide transparency between issuers and investors to make sure that investors are making the informed decision and issuers are finding into the right financing support for their own plans.
Thank you, Valerie. I hope you have, now you can hear me, right?
Yes,
okay.
Much better.
Sorry about that. Nandini, this question is for you. The World Federation of Exchanges has been a leader in supporting exchanges to improve their understanding of sustainability issues and working with other allies, such as sustainable stock exchanges, to mobilize exchange action on sustainability. Some global supervisors have now ranked sustainability risks and reported high on the regulatory agendas. And I know also there are others working in inclusive, including that they want to include in financial statement not only the financial risk but non-financial risk as ESG. So my question for you is, could you give us an overview of how exchanges are approaching this regulatory initiative around the world?
Well, thank you, and let me start by congratulating Olga and the team at the Panama Stock Exchange for not only this excellent investor forum, but also for the leadership they have shown over the years in sustainability and in being at the frontier of that debate for emerging markets and for markets across the world. So really, congratulations to Olga and the team at Panama Stock Exchange. As all of you know, the WFE, we are the industry group globally, the only industry group globally for exchanges and for CCP. So, along being on a panel here with Valerie, who looks after this, who represents the world's largest CSD, together we are the entire cycle of the trade, if you like. So exchanges have always recognized their role in ESG. So this is a mandate, like a vocation, if you like, that goes back 15 years. So it's very gratifying to see the mainstreaming of ESG. Our members and the WFP has been working on this topic for like 15 years. So within that, where are we? There are a number of different vectors in which the exchange and the CCP increasingly, as the discussion grows around risk and how you model risk. So there are a number of vectors in which the exchange and the CCP sit really in the middle of the system and are well placed to think about how to drive the sustainability agenda. One of the things that we do at the WFE is that we work with our members, and Panama will shortly become a member. They are an affiliate right now, but we work with members and affiliate exchanges. We have 300 in our membership around the world to have common policy positions and to agree standards. So in 2018, for example, I think around the time that sustainability was beginning to be interesting as an industry, we came forward with 5 principles, which we said every exchange will use as a framework for mapping and creating their own sustainability journey. And that's where we are. So we began in a very formal way some years ago. We also benchmark as an industry. So we benchmark constantly. So every year, in fact, we have an annual benchmarking exercise. We make it public, it's open to members and to affiliates, and we look at the results. And it's fascinating. If you go back, it's the 8th year this year that we have done it. It will come out maybe next week, the survey, but you can really trace the trends and themes that have played out in the dialogue and in the debate around this area. One of the key changes, if you like, in the last 18 months has been an interesting move away from a pure stock exchange focus. It's obvious as to why the stock exchange, is the first frontier in any conversation about sustainability, because you have the issuers there, the exchanges are also, they are the frontline regulator. So last year, for example, our annual survey and benchmarking showed that there were 14 markets around the world where the exchange was leading on the sustainability effort, not the regulator. So we are really the frontline regulator and pushing the needle, if you like, moving the needle on a number of fronts. But you have the exchange, the stock exchange role, which wraps around the role, the work that we do with issuers. Our role as public markets is to both bring companies onto the market, so that improves corporate governance for all, but then we also have to ensure that the disclosure and the transparency requirements that the exchanges bring, which improve the ESG data set for everyone, are also appropriate. So that's, I think, a big piece of it. And then the second thing that we have really seen in the last 18 months is the emergence of the debate around derivatives exchanges. So derivatives exchanges, of course, create and are creating now many of the solutions that we will find to solve some of these issues. And if you look at the emerging kind of global carbon market, it is heavily dominated. All the derivatives exchanges are active, and that's really part of their role to shape solutions, to find solutions. And then you have the CCP, and I'm going to stop there. The CCP is, of course, the ultimate vehicle to manage risk. Their role is to be the risk managers of the financial system. And we are still at the tail end of a pandemic, so we all understand how important it is to manage risk, to map risk, to understand risk. And as we have seen in the last couple of years, central banks are increasingly thinking publicly about first, climate risk. So where we are now is everyone is thinking about climate risk. But in the next step, we will have biodiversity, or nature, as sometimes people call it. And we are seeing a very welcome emergence of the so-called S and the G, the social and the governance. The governance is an area where exchanges from the beginning have worked and have a leadership role, but you're really seeing that play out across the board. So at the WFE, we are active across all those areas that we mentioned. We benchmark, we work on policy, there's a lot of data we provide on behalf of the industry. We create, on our free database, you can find green bond data, for example. So all part of our mandate, and really exciting to be part of this discussion here. Let me turn it back to you now.
Thank you, Nandini. The next question is for Eduardo. Eduardo, as the world's leading proponent of responsible investment, the principle of responsible investment has been working to achieve a sustainable global financial system by encouraging the adoption of the principle and collaboration of their implementation. Could you please explain to us what is the importance and benefits of sustainability reporting and the disclosure of climate-related risk and opportunities for investors and issuers?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question. So let me start by mentioning one project that PRI is developing and the reason why PRI decided to develop this project. So we have one initiative that is called Driving Meaningful Data Project. And we start this project mainly because after, conversations with thousands of investors, PRI is a network. In this moment, we support more than 5,000 investors all around the world. And so having conversations with them about different topics, most of them mention that we need better data and that PRI need to play a role because of their global relevance to promote that better data. So we decided to create this initiative, and it's more than 3 years since we started. In the last 3 years, we are seeing so many changes and a big evolution on trying to find ways to have a more standardized approach to ESG data, to climate reporting. So, for example, since 2015 that TCFD was released, it's amazing how much impact that framework is creating. Just to give you an example, we now have more than 40 investors based in Latin America that are saying to companies that they are expecting for these companies to report under the TCFD guidelines. So for sure is getting a lot of momentum. So I just want to make this emphasis from your question. If we don't have good ESG data, responsible investment is not going to be possible. That's the key connection between the ESG data and the work that an organization like PRI is doing. If the investors that we are advising don't have access to ESG data that have quality that can be compared, it's not going to be possible for them to say to the market that they are doing responsible investment. So that's why our project of driving meaningful data is so strategic. And also, as I mentioned in my first answer, we have another big risk right now, and it's called greenwashing. And a big part to solve that issue, to solve that challenge of having investors and having companies just making claims about their ESG approaches and not having the capacity to support those claims. That's another reason why a good ESG data and have global frameworks that allow companies to provide ESG data with high quality is going to be so important. And I think on that note, stock exchanges are playing and are going to play a very strategic role to improve the quality of ESG data in coming years.
Thank you, Eduardo. This is a next question. I will ask you I would like to ask you the question for the three of you. So I will start with Valerie. The question is, how do we collectively work to ensure that we continue to promote the incorporation of sustainability considerations and disclosure of ESG factors into capital markets? Valerie.
So yeah, as I mentioned, we are very much active in injecting, I would say, ESG considerations in all the services that we are deploying. So typically, I already referred to the fact that we have invested in this fintech or regtech, actually, Greenery, which is really, a bit like Eduardo was saying, which is really, an easy tool to allow an issuer to really provide all transparent information about the ESG friendliness, about all the criteria that a regulator is requesting for an issuer. And the beauty with Greenomy is that the information will be directly provided by the issuer to the investors. The other thing as well, we are, trying to, Euroclear, we are very active on financing services, on providing, collateral management services to secure any type of exposure. And there we have started also to develop baskets of ESG securities that allowed a collateral taker to only be supported, be guaranteed by ESG type of securities. So this is an example to say that for any services that we are providing, we are definitely trying to inject a lot more ESG consideration in the, I would say, the development and the distribution of those services. The other thing as well is to continue to support the markets with which we are working. I was referring beforehand to Greenomy, which is going to talk to the Grupo de Trabajo de Finanzas Sostenibles de Panama. We are also working, of course, with Latinex to see if we could help them create a green index. So these are the type of support that we are also, promoting with all the markets we are working on. Greenomy is also very active on the Middle East, again trying to support the local markets to develop their own taxonomy, which again would support, if you wish, the local capital market to become more sustainable in the future. So I've given you a number of examples, but of course I can't give you all of them. But I just want to, convey the message that for us in our strategic development, ESG has become really a pillar to make sure that we help the market to become more sustainable. Because I think we have really moved from an era where the companies were looking at maximizing profit for their shareholders towards an era whereby, and we are a strong believer in that, whereby the company has also a duty not only to look at their shareholders, but look at their people, look at their different stakeholders, the regulators, and the society globally. And we believe that it's more, the companies which are looking at all these different stakeholders have probably a lot more long-term sustainability, long-term success than the ones which are really focusing only on one dimension. And so as a market financial infrastructure, we have a role to play, not only as a company, but really as, a conduit between those issuers and investors.
Thank you, Valerie. Nandini, do you want me to ask the question again, or is
no? I remembered it. And it's a good one. It's a very fundamental question, and that all of us in this room, are grappling with. Not just those of us on the panel, but those of us in this room. So ESG has been a strategic priority of the WFE and of the exchange industry for the last, I want to say, 3 or 4 years. So every year we pick 5 priorities. We try to be ahead, right? So we make them a priority before it becomes a priority for the industry. And in addition to doing the work for the last 15 years, ESG has been a priority for us and for the industry that we represent for the last 4 or 5 years. The best way I think I can answer your question is to give you some data. And the data that, every year, as I said, we have this benchmarking, this annual benchmarking exercise that we make public. And the survey this year, the annual report, the WFE's annual, ESG report this year, when you look at it, the trend is very, very clear. More and more exchanges are engaging with it. And if you look at it this year, we had a big leap in the number of participants in this benchmarking exercise who reported participating in 12 ESG initiatives. So every year we map against the 12, and this year there was a surge, it more than doubled. This year also, it was really interesting. We added one around the S, and there was a big uptake of interest in that. there's a lot of work around education going on. We ourselves are part of that. But you're seeing the industry and the WFE focus a lot on initiatives around ESG, education. So if you look at where the trend is in the benchmarking exercise, initiatives for ESG education ranked probably 8 in 2019. They were 3rd in 2020, and this year they are 2nd. So I'm sure if you had to ask me to guess, I won't guess, but I would not be surprised if next year they were even higher. So, that I think education is front and center of the exchange and of WFE's efforts in embedding sustainability. But I think it really helps that we see this wider environment as we come out of COVID, as we come out of the pandemic. It's a time when we have all had thought, we've all thought about things, and we've also, in a very kind of visceral way, been locked up in our homes. And so people have thought about the world that lies outside these walls, climate, nature, the loss of biodiversity. But also the pandemic has brought great human suffering, in terms of poverty, etc., greater poverty, people being hungry, more people falling into the hunger categories. So all of this, I think, has really helped focus people's mind, not just the exchanges, because the exchanges have been on this topic for a long time, but the wider ecosystem in which we sit. And that is important because the exchange alone cannot bring change. We always need, we are the center of the center, but we need the ecosystem to walk with us. And what we are really seeing, we've got PRI on this panel, we have Euroclear on this panel, we're seeing the ecosystem move together on ESG. And finally, if you think kind of looking ahead, we're seeing increasing interest in product. And for all emerging markets, because we're talking in Panama here, I wish we were there in person with you, but you have to have fundamental pillars in the market for it to develop. You need liquidity, you need, good regulation, you need policy levers that will bring issuers onto the market, you need excellent post-trade arrangements to take risk out of the market, etc. And to all of those, you can add sustainability now, because we have a millennial investor class, not only millennial, but it helps that the investor class, the generation coming up, cares about ESG and these considerations. So we can then, with product, with leadership, with policy, with education, with action, we can serve the ecosystem in which we live.
Thank you, Nandini. And Eduardo, this is the last question.
Let me go back to this one really quick. I just want to make an emphasis on this point. I think this is also a good opportunity to give a context of what's happening in Latin America. And is this. So the question is about how to continue promoting, the incorporation of sustainability consideration. But I want to make an emphasis on this. This is not going to be about how to continue promoting. This is happening. And what I'm trying to say is that we now have regulations in Brazil, in Mexico, in Chile, in Colombia, where it's mandatory for investors and for companies to consider ESG information. So I understand that it's important that we continue promoting, and education is going to be key. And these kind of sessions, are really important. But just take in consideration that everything that you are listening today about ESG and the importance of this, regulators are coming to the party, and they are mandating that we work on this. And it's not only happening in Europe, it's not only happening in, Canada, US, no. It's also happening in Latin America, Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Colombia. In these 4 markets, it's now mandatory for private pension funds to integrate ESG information into their investment process. So the conversation is changing. We need to move forward on this. We need to find solutions to all the challenges that we have on data, on transparency, on different topics. But again, regulation is here, and we need to deal with that, and we need to prepare to comply with this new regulation.
I agree, Eduardo. It's a matter of time. With the permission of Valerie, Nandini, and Eduardo, I would like to say some closing remarks in Spanish. I want to just share with the audience what I feel, how I feel about this matter. If you don't mind, I speak in Spanish now. Just 5 minutes, I promise. Okay. Les comparto un poco por experiencia propia. El Foro de Inversionistas ha estado hablando de sostenibilidad desde hace varios años. Y en lo personal, yo no había estado involucrada en el tema de sostenibilidad hasta recientemente. Y yo creo que este tema de sostenibilidad es un tema que pensamos que es algo que está de moda. Lo comparo como el gobierno corporativo. Cuando inició el Instituto de Gobierno Corporativo, todo lo veíamos como algo lejano, pero el Instituto Corporativo está para quedarse, y no solamente está para quedarse, ahora forma parte de nuestra regulación a todos los que estamos aquí sentados. Eso va a pasar con los ESG, tal como lo está diciendo Eduardo, y eso va a pasar más temprano que tarde. En mi caso, que me siento en algunas juntas directivas, a veces veo, siempre pregunto, es importante, nosotros los miembros de junta directiva tenemos que poner especial atención a todo lo que es riesgos, y tenemos que medir los riesgos financieros, pero también los riesgos no financieros. Y dentro de los riesgos no financieros están los riesgos ambientales, sociales y de gobernanzas. Y muchas veces he visto que hablan de los riesgos ambientales y los riesgos sociales, y siempre pregunto, ¿dónde está la G? Entonces, nos tenemos que empezar a acostumbrar que es ASG, porque aquí en Panamá yo siento que todavía no estamos acostumbrados. Ya Eduardo nos dijo que en 4 países es regulación. Yo he estado en varios seminarios con gente de afuera, y conocemos varias instituciones que están trabajando en regulaciones para inclusive este tema de los riesgos ASG sean incluidos dentro de los estados financieros. Entonces, yo sé que es un tema que de pronto no todos están interesados, pero el mensaje que les quiero dejar hoy es un tema que nos debe interesar a todos, a los inversionistas, a los dueños de empresas, porque es un tema que nos conviene a todos. Es un tema que realmente va a hacer mejor a las empresas, nos va a hacer tomar mejores decisiones, y va a hacer que tengamos una mejor sociedad. Entonces, ese era el mensaje que yo le quería mandar a ustedes, y ojalá salgan de aquí convencidos de que el ASG está aquí, y hoy nos están presentando como una opción y la vemos un poco lejos, pero créanme que está más cerca que lejos. Entonces, Valerie, Nandini, and Eduardo, thanks a lot for your presentation, for illustrating what's ahead of us. And what I'm saying here is that we're going to see all of what is happening in Mexico, Brazil, and those other countries that are implementing already ESG within the regulations. I know we are going to see it, and we are going to see it soon in Panama, and we like to be ahead always. Our chairman is always ahead, and she participates in everything that's related to sustainability. We are very proactive in Latinex, and we really like to be on board in everything that has to be with sustainability. So thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias también.